So Nikki was a very rare, special human being. He is someone that exuded more love and compassion than any person I've ever met. You know, our family grew up in a family of deep love, but you know, he exceeded everyone's expectations in terms of his selflessness. That was a common expression people would use to describe him. He was a high achiever, you know, valedictorian in student government, debate, cheer, sports, film, multitude of activities. But one with all that, he had a very low ego, and it made him quite approachable. If he was someone that was talking to you on the other side of the table, what I commonly heard was all he wanted to talk about was the other person across the table. He would adopt people that were in need, and they'd become his special pet projects. It started when he was in high school, but then when he went into college, he started gathering up a lot of people that had anxieties and issues, which is not an unusual place to find people that are troubled or concerned because of their grades, their parents, their career paths, their girlfriend or boyfriend, their sexuality or whatever. And so Nikki would just sort of adopt them and stay with them. So he was a consummate sort of networker in that regard, and always, you know, staying in contact with people. Well, so he really, you know, he grew up playing football when he was young, but then he adopted rugby later, and so in high school he was playing rugby. He dabbled in lacrosse, but rugby was the one he really enjoyed.
So how has...
And he resurrected at Memorial the male cheerleader, so that had died out as a tradition, and he and a group of friends had restructured that. So he kind of liked to be out in front, but again, in a way that was more inclusive. So he was well known for bringing people in. And
So how has life changed for you and your family?
so my wife and daughter and Nikki were a unit of 4 best friends. You know, we weren't really like parent-child relationships so much as best buddies. We grew up extremely close to each other. When I say grew up, we all grew up together. For whatever serendipity, our astrological signs represent the 4 elements of antiquity. I'm earth, my wife is fire, my daughter is water, and Nikki was the wind. And that's just through luck. We didn't pick that. And so we kind of viewed ourselves as a whole unit. And you know, we were constantly engaged in talking with each other. Ours was the house growing up, where all of Allie and Nikki's friends would gather and spend the night, and Allie's friends were friends with Nikki's friends, and vice versa. So it was a very friendly, loving sort of way to grow up. And so right now, my wife and my daughter, you know, we just feel like a big hole has been ripped out of us by the loss of Nikki. We just miss him so much that we're in tears 5 or 6 times a day. I can't land an airplane from a flight without being in tears during part of the journey, just because I associate flying with the happy times of family vacations and things like that. Yeah, so you know, we didn't have a background of understanding what hazing was. I'm all new to this. I didn't grow up in the Greek system. I was the first of my family line to graduate from college, so I didn't have an understanding of Greek tradition, and I was never in a group that ever, you know, required an initiation rite in order to join acceptance into a group. So I would have never in my wildest dreams fathomed hazing. And my wife is from China, Hong Kong, and you know, they've never heard of this either. So this was very new to us. So when he joined a fraternity, I was a bit surprised because he's so broad in his reach for activities. I didn't see him doing that, but I let him make his own decisions to do it. And I never had the notion that I should dive deep to think about hazing, because in my wildest dreams I wouldn't have thought people would do that to each other. Later he was tapped, because he is such an exemplar person, he was tapped to go into this organization called the Texas Cowboys. The Texas Cowboys, I was told, is an honorary organization where, you know, the top people are put forth by respected organizations to be members of the Texas Cowboys. And so when he told me he had been selected for that, I said, well, I'm proud of you. You know, I think that's great. We didn't know the day that he was going to this initiation event, even though we keep a group chat. He didn't tell us about that. And it wasn't until Sunday morning that I got a phone call that Nikki had been in an accident. So we spent a month in various hospitals. He had essentially been declared brain dead at the first place, but we were escaping around trying to find a way to give him more time. He had never come to. Ultimately, he was declared brain dead a couple of times, and they pulled the plug on him. But my entire time that I was in the hospital, all I cared about was his safety. But there was one question that was niggling in the back of my mind, is why would these boys have embarked upon a journey over 2 hours at 3 or 4 a.m. at night? Why would they do that? What was the circumstance? It wasn't until after his funeral that I went to Austin, and I dove down deep by asking some of the students that were there at the event what happened. And they told me about incidents of Nicky being paddled, where his pants were pulled down and he was paddled. And then that sparked the light bulb in my wife and I's head, because we'd seen bruise marks on his backside, where we were wondering, this doesn't look like an automobile injury. And my wife asked me about it, and all I cared about was his head injury. And so another boy told us, yes, Nikki was paddled. And then we learned that in that same initiation rites, some boy bit the head off of a hamster. Subsequently, you know, as we kept talking to them, we heard that they had a campfire late into 3 a.m. and that some of the boys were allowed to leave. And they were allowed to leave in blatant violation of what we learned later is the UT on their website posted transportation policies. The boy did not have adequate sleep. They did not have enough seat belts in the car for all of the passengers. There were alcohol bottles on the floor of the cardboard. And then according to UT policy, there needs to be an awake navigator. But we were told that the boys were so exhausted that every boy fell asleep immediately when they were in the car. So the driver rolled the car when he fell asleep. Nicky was thrown from the car, and that's when he suffered the injury that was fatal for him. So, you know, sleep deprivation, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's about 50-50, almost equal with driving under the influence of alcohol in terms of the traffic fatalities and traffic accidents. And there have been studies in the US and the UK that say that, you know, sleep deprivation's impact on your body is like being legally drunk. It has the same nulling impact on your motor reflexes and your judgment.
How many boys were in the car with him?
There was a driver up front, and then a passenger up front, and then 4 people in the back seat, and there was only enough seat belts for 3.
How old was Nicky?
Pardon?
How old was he?
He was 20.
So
His birthday would have been in January.
So he was a junior?
He was a junior. He was in the coveted Business Honors Program, which is a very hard group to get into. He was a triple major with a minor. His double major was in radio, television, film, because that was his passion. He wanted to be a director and make movies. And if you've seen some of the body of work that he did at high school, you know, that was something that was quite of interest to him.
How do you feel about UT's decision to suspend the Cowboys?
I think the decision to suspend is the right one. I'm afraid they didn't implement enough tough changes on the organization. And you know, in the case of the death in the mid-90s of Gabe Higgins, well, there was hazing that was done at that incident, and Gabe Higgins died at the same sort of initiation rite event. At the time that Gabe Higgins died, the Cowboys were on probation. The Cowboys were put on 5-year probation after Gabe Higgins' death, you know, I know that one of the ex-Cowboys that was asked to be on the oversight of the alumni oversight, I subsequently found out that he stepped down saying, the 21-year-olds are running the place, they're wasting my time, I'm out of here. So the alumni were not looking after controls. They have a history, I've learned subsequently, and a tradition of the paddling. There was hazing going all the way back to where they used to do branding, but a number of these rights have been there. And the alumni, you know, even after the 5-year hiatus, you would have thought they would have put in risk control systems, but they didn't. And this was not, as the Cowboys make out, a one-off instance in Nikki's case where there are just a few rogue bad actors. In fact, this has been happening for, as the report shows, for a couple of years now. And so, you know, this is a systemic organizational problem. It's not, oh, let's isolate the cancer of 3 or 4 bad actor kids. It's an organizational risk structuring thing. And the leadership and the alumni have proven that they are not capable, either willing, they're either incompetent or have no desire to change this. And their responses recently on the sanctions that came out just show me that it's not going to be any different. So I'm satisfied with the duration of it, but I listed a number of reform proposals to the administration. 2 of them got adopted, but a bunch of them didn't get adopted, and I think that's unfortunate, because I don't have a high degree of confidence that the same people are going to be in charge. They're going to repeat the same problems. Their comments show complete lack of remorse, complete lack of ownership of that they did not control the situation. The Cowboy leadership at the student level, and I don't know how much the alumni were involved in this, this shows it wasn't just rogue boys. They created a structure at that offsite where they know that they're allowing one group to go here, one group to go there, another group to go here, another group to go here. And each of those groups are allowed to dispense their own brand of initiation or hazing, knowing, they told me, that some of them go very light on the initiation, and some of them the hazing is actually quite brutal and rough. They knew this, the leadership knew it, and they knew that it had happened in prior years. They know that X, Y, and Z fraternities are hard on the boys, and maybe the independents in the Tejas group are initiation light.
So where was the retreat? They were driving back from where to where?
It was 2.5 hours north of Austin, near Lampasas, that direction.
The accident happened in late September?
The accident happened on September 30th.
And Nikki passed away?
Well, it depends on your definition. I mean, the medical people said he passed away almost immediately. So at Baylor Scott and White, they were ready to throw in the towel. We tried to. That's a whole nother subject for a discussion. But the way that the way that they declare brain death in the United States and Texas is particularly brutal about it. The hospital has the right to pull the plug. So we were running from hospital to hospital, trying to delay the throwing in the white towel. It's different in China, so China doesn't have that brain death concept, but the Baylor Scott and White was ready to declare him brain dead there, and so we escaped out of there to another hospital, but we were only given so much time before that. So I can tell you when we had his funeral, but you know, someone's definition of death is different from person to person. There's a coroner's report that lists his death.
Well, tell us about some of the reforms that they adopted and some of the reforms that you recommended that they did not adopt. That must be completely baffling.
Yeah, well, so Gabe Higgins, when he died, his mother took a very painful period of time to kind of learn what happened, and over a multi-year period wrote a book called A Cowboy's Secret. Her name's Ruth Barton, and so one of the things I said that should be part of it is all of the boys that are coming in as pledges should have to read Ruth's book, and then be able to reflect upon the actual memory about the history that the Cowboys have. This is important to me because knowing the history and being open about it, is what prevents future bad behavior. Owning the past is the only way to fix the future. And so what I suggested, and the university appears to have taken that on board, that recommendation, is to mandatorily have to read Ruth's book, which I think is a good thing. The other thing, Nikki was at an event that involved the Cowboys where they confiscated his cell phone. And this has happened on many organizations around the country in many cases, and you can understand why they would want to confiscate a phone. But in that case, his girlfriend had been asking him, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he was not allowed to reply to her, and he wasn't really okay. He ended up having to, he was liquored up, and he drove his moped through the city of Austin in an unacceptable condition, and was fortunate to get home. But so it's not an uncommon practice for these organizations to confiscate phones. There's two problems with confiscating the phone. One, it might be your only lifeline out to get help. Mm-hmm. So you take a phone away, the call for help, the plea for medical help, or somebody to come get you out of a bad situation, it may be your only way there. And two, it serves as a deterrent. If you know that somebody might be recording audio or video bad behavior, then it can deter that. I guess on a third, it could actually record it, so evidentiary, but I think the deterrence is really important.